The hangar stretched endlessly beneath the pale light of dawn, its cavernous ribs echoing the distant hum of turbines from the airfield beyond. The metallic scent of aviation fuel hung thick in the cold air, mixing with the sterile tang of machine oil. Light glinted off the sleek chrome surfaces of 6 helicopters arranged in flawless symmetry, each a mechanical masterpiece worth more than most lives. And walking between them, his polished Italian leather shoes tapping sharply against the concrete, was Marcus Blackwood. At 32, Marcus was the kind of man sculpted by power and precision. His suit, charcoal gray, hand-stitched in London, moved with him like shadow. His watch, a platinum Patek Philippe, gleamed each time he adjusted his cufflinks. There was no hesitation in his stride, no warmth in his eyes. Only calculation. He did not walk. He commanded space. The meeting today would finalize an $800 million defense contract with Japanese investors, the kind of deal that turned men into legends, the kind that made his father's ghost fade further into silence. As he paced before the crown jewel of his empire, the prototype Blackwood Phoenix helicopter, his reflection shimmered faintly in its black titanium frame. Sleek, lethal, perfect, just like him. "Mr. Blackwood," called Patricia, his assistant, from across the hangar. Her voice echoed between the metal walls. "The delegation will arrive in 20 minutes. Marcus didn't turn. "Make sure the champagne is properly chilled. I want the table set precisely as instructed. They appreciate ceremony." "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. Ceremony, detail, control. These were his trinity. Nothing in his world dared defy it. He stepped closer to the Phoenix, running a gloved hand along the polished body. "Beautiful," he murmured. "You'll make history today." Then something moved. A flicker of motion near the landing gear. Marcus froze, frowning. The hangar was a fortress of cameras, guards, and keycard locks. No one entered without clearance. Yet there, half hidden behind the wheel, something small shifted. "What the hell?" he muttered. He strode forward, his shoes snapping sharply against the concrete. As he rounded the aircraft, his irritation hardened into disbelief. Crouched beside the massive tire was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her tangled blonde hair framed a dirt-streaked face. Her small frame swallowed in a tattered pink t-shirt and jeans that hung loose from her knees. Her shoes were falling apart, one bound with electrical tape, the other split open at the toe. She looked up at him, eyes impossibly blue beneath the grime. Marcus's lip curled. "Security!" His shout thundered through the hangar. How did this street rat get in here? The girl didn't flinch. She stood slow and deliberate, brushing the dust from her knees. Her voice, when it came, was soft. "I'm sorry, mister. I was just watching the pretty bird." He stared at her, incredulous. "Pretty bird?" She nodded. "It's beautiful." Marcus gave a short, cruel laugh. "This pretty bird," he sneered, "cost $47 million. Do you have any idea what you're looking at?" 3 security men arrived, panting, red-faced. "Sir, we have no idea how she—" "Wait, stop talking," Marcus snapped. His gaze never left the child. Something about her calm unnerved him. Her eyes, steady and bright, met his without fear. He crouched, bringing himself to her level. The faint smell of jasmine cologne mixed with the sharp tang of dirt between them. "What's your name, little beggar?" "Sophie." "Well, Sophie," he said with a mocking smile, "do you know what this machine does?" "It flies," she answered simply. "Like the angels my mama told me about." He chuckled, straightening up. "That's right, it flies. But flying isn't for little beggars. It's for people with brains, with breeding. People like me." Her small hands curled into fists, but her voice stayed steady. "Maybe angels don't need breeding." A ripple of uneasy laughter ran through the onlookers. Marcus's smile thinned. He looked around, then back at her. "Tell you what," he said finally, his tone dripping with mock generosity. "Let's make a deal. You start this helicopter, just start it, and I'll adopt you. You'll live in my mansion, eat real food, go to real schools. Everything you've ever dreamed of." The girl tilted her head. "You promise?" The question hit him like a challenge. "Of course," he said, smiling as if humoring a child. "If you can start it." The hangar fell into silence. Sophie looked at the machine, her blue eyes glowing faintly in the early light. Then she turned back to Marcus and smiled. Something flickered there deep within her gaze. Not innocence, not fear, knowing. The silence that followed her smile felt unnatural. It spread through the hangar like a slow ripple of dread. The workers, who only moments ago had chuckled under their breath, now stood frozen, watching a barefoot child stare down a billionaire. The faint mechanical hum of the cooling engines filled the void between them. Marcus's smirk wavered for the briefest of moments before returning, sharper and more venomous. "Well," he said, clapping his hands once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Let's not keep your new father waiting. Go ahead, little angel. Show us how you'll start a $47 million aircraft." Sophie's blue eyes flickered from Marcus to the machine towering behind him. The Phoenix stood like a sleeping beast, its smooth frame glinting under the overhead lights. She moved closer, not with hesitation but with curiosity, like she was greeting something familiar. Her small fingers grazed the cold metal surface, tracing it as if reading Braille from another world. Patricia, the assistant, shifted uncomfortably near the control table. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Marcus snapped, never looking away from Sophie. She wanted to touch the bird. Let her. "I'm curious to see what fantasy she's built in that dirty little head of hers." Sophie didn't seem to hear him. Her focus had narrowed entirely to the helicopter. Her reflection shimmered in the polished glass of the cockpit. She placed a small palm against it and whispered something, too soft for anyone to hear. Thompson, the head of security, frowned. "Sir, maybe we should remove her." "She could what?" Marcus interrupted, a cruel amusement twisting his mouth. "Scratch the paint?" The men exchanged uneasy glances. Sophie climbed onto the small maintenance step, her small frame barely reaching the lower edge of the cockpit. "It's warm," she said softly, as though to herself. "Like it's still dreaming." Marcus chuckled. "Dreaming, she says? Listen to that. The poetry of poverty. I'll have to remember that line for the investors. Our machines don't just fly, they dream." A few nervous laughs followed, but they were thin, hollow. Sophie didn't respond. She pressed her ear lightly against the body of the helicopter, then turned toward the cockpit door handle. The latch clicked. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "How the hell did she—" Before he could finish, the door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The onlookers gasped. Sophie climbed inside. "Stop her!" Marcus barked, but his voice lacked its usual steel. For the first time, there was a note of unease in it, a crack in the marble of his composure. "Sir, the ignition keys aren't even in—" Patricia began, but trailed off, because the helicopter lights had just flickered on. The instrument panels, dark moments ago, glowed to life, one by one. Red, green, blue. The Phoenix began to hum. The air filled with a faint electric whine. Marcus blinked. "That's impossible," he whispered. Inside the cockpit, Sophie sat upright in the pilot's seat. Her small hands hovered over the controls, moving not randomly but with precision. Her lips moved silently, reciting something. The engineers who had gathered nearby leaned forward, frowning. One of them muttered, "She's flipping the correct sequence." Another shook his head. "That's the startup procedure. She shouldn't even know that." Marcus's pulse quickened. His throat went dry. "She's bluffing," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. She must have seen it in a movie, or— The rotor blades twitched. Everyone froze. The next sound was a rising metallic groan as the blades began to turn. Slow at first, then faster. The hangar filled with wind. Papers flew from clipboards. A coffee cup rolled off a table and shattered. Sophie's hair whipped wildly around her face, golden strands cutting through the light like threads of fire. Her small body stayed perfectly still amid the chaos. Marcus took a step forward, shielding his face from the dust spiraling through the air. His expression was a battlefield of disbelief and rage. "Turn it off," he shouted, as if the child could even hear him. "You'll destroy it!" But the Phoenix didn't seem to be obeying Sophie or Marcus. It was as if it had recognized her. The whine of its turbines deepened, harmonizing with a sound beneath, a low pulse that seemed almost alive. Patricia whispered, "Sir, it's like she knows it." The girl's voice rose, faint but clear through the roar. "Mama said machines are only asleep until you whisper the truth to them." Marcus stumbled backward. For a moment, he wasn't standing in his empire of glass and titanium. He was back in a boardroom 2 years ago, Dr. Evelyn Hart slamming a file onto his desk, eyes blazing. "You're rushing the Phoenix prototype, Marcus. You'll kill someone. You can't play God with human lives." He had fired her that day, and the next week she had vanished. The memory vanished as the helicopter's rotors screamed to full motion. The girl's silhouette sat framed in a storm of light and air, impossibly small in the pilot's chair, yet commanding it like a queen. Marcus's voice broke through the cacophony. "Get her out!" he bellowed. Security rushed forward, but the girl reached out, pressed a single button, then silence. The engine cut. The blade slowed. The Phoenix settled back into stillness, humming softly, almost content. Dust hung in the air. The echo of the wind faded into a suffocating quiet. Everyone stared. Sophie climbed down carefully, her face calm, eyes glowing with the same eerie intelligence that had unsettled Marcus from the start. She walked straight toward him, stopping a few feet away. "You said you'd adopt me," she said simply. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The world that had always obeyed him now felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. Sophie tilted her head slightly, studying him the way one studies a dangerous animal behind glass. "You built it," she whispered. "But you never understood it." Marcus's jaw tightened. He tried to recover the sneer, the smirk, the weaponized charm, but it wouldn't come. All he could do was stare into those unblinking eyes. For the first time in his life, Marcus Blackwood felt small, and deep within those eyes, beneath the calm, beneath the quiet, he saw something that turned his stomach cold, not fear. Not innocence, recognition. It was as though the girl had seen him long before this day, seen everything he was, and everything he had destroyed to get there. Then she smiled again, soft and knowing, and Marcus realized with a chill that crawled up his spine that the real question wasn't how she'd started the machine, it was why she came here at all. The hangar was silent again, but it wasn't the comfortable silence of power that Marcus Blackwood ruled over. It was a silence that felt alive. Every person in the room stood motionless, as if the air itself had frozen after what they'd just witnessed. The faint metallic groan of the helicopter cooling filled the emptiness, a ghostly echo of the chaos that had erupted only moments before. Marcus adjusted his tie with a trembling hand. He didn't notice that his fingers shook. "Everyone, out," he said finally. His voice wasn't a command this time. It was thin, brittle. The workers hesitated. Thompson, the head of security, looked uncertain. Patricia met Marcus's eyes, searching for the usual fire of arrogance that once made her hate him a little less than she feared him. But it wasn't there. Not completely. Someone had cracked it. When the last of them had left, Marcus turned his attention back to the child standing a few feet from him. Sophie hadn't moved. Her small hands were folded neatly in front of her, and her bare feet were black with grease and dust. The wind from the helicopter had left streaks of grime across her cheeks, but her eyes remained clear, two piercing blue lights cutting through the haze. "How?" he asked, his tone low, careful, as if afraid of the answer. "Did you do that?" Sophie blinked once. "I just listened." "Listened?" Marcus repeated as though the word was foreign. She nodded slowly. "It was humming when I found it. I just helped it wake up." He stared at her, jaw tightening. "Machines don't hum, girl. They respond to commands, programming. Not this one," she interrupted softly. "This one remembers things." Her words hung between them, delicate yet impossible. Marcus's mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe she had memorized a startup video. Maybe a technician had left the system unlocked. Maybe, but no. The Phoenix's startup sequence wasn't even accessible outside the research terminal. Only senior engineers had the clearance. The thought slithered into his brain, cold and unwelcome. She knew things she couldn't possibly know. Patricia reappeared at the far end of the hangar, clutching a clipboard. "Sir, the investors are—" "Cancel it," Marcus snapped. "Cancel." "The $800 million presentation?" she said, incredulous. "You heard me." He didn't wait for her response. His eyes were still locked on Sophie. "You're coming with me," he said, stepping forward. Sophie didn't flinch, didn't move back. "You said you'd adopt me," she reminded him. The simplicity of her words struck him harder than any accusation. He expected defiance or gratitude or fear. Instead, there was only calm certainty, as if she already knew what came next. He took a breath and forced a cold smile. "You're quite the little negotiator, aren't you?" He motioned toward the exit. "Come then. Let's see what kind of orphanage produces miracles." Sophie followed without a sound. Marcus's office sat high above the hangar, a glass cube overlooking his empire. From the massive windows, the early sunlight turned the rows of aircraft into sleek metallic statues. Everything about the space screamed wealth and control. Mahogany desk, imported leather chairs, the faint smell of expensive cigars lingering from nights of victory. But this morning, Marcus didn't feel victorious. He stood with his back to the glass, staring at the girl sitting quietly on the opposite side of the room. Sophie sat on the edge of the chair, feet barely touching the floor. Her eyes roamed the office, the gleaming model jets, the awards, the framed photo of Marcus shaking hands with generals. She said nothing. He broke the silence first. "You've caused quite a spectacle," he said, pouring himself a drink. The sound of ice clinking against crystal echoed in the large room. "Tell me, Sophie, who taught you about helicopters?" She looked at him, thoughtful. "My mama." Marcus froze, the glass halfway to his lips. "Your mother," he repeated. "And who is your mother?" "Evelyn Hart," she said. The name fell from her lips like a whisper, but it struck Marcus like thunder. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. Marcus's throat went dry. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "Dr. Hart is gone?" Sophie interrupted. Her tone wasn't mournful, it was certain. "That's what you told everyone." He turned away from her, walking toward the window. His reflection looked ghostly in the morning light. "Your mother," he said slowly, "was a brilliant engineer. Too emotional for this line of work. She didn't understand that progress requires risk." Sophie tilted her head. "She said you didn't understand that dreams aren't made of metal." Marcus turned sharply. "Dreams don't make history," he snapped. "Machines do. I make history." Sophie stood, small and fearless, her reflection aligning with his in the window. "Then why are you afraid of me?" she asked quietly. The question sliced through him. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came. Because she was right, he was afraid. Not of her. Not really, but of what she represented. The past he buried. The woman he silenced. The brilliance he stole. Sophie stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama said when the phoenix rises again, the truth will wake with it." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "What truth?" But Sophie didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her torn jeans and pulled out a small, metallic object, a broken key fob engraved with the emblem of Blackwood Aerospace Industries. "I found this by the river," she said. "Next to the place where they said my mama's car crashed." The world seemed to tilt. The air left Marcus's lungs. She placed the fob gently on his desk beside the shards of his fallen glass. "It still works," she added softly. "Just like your pretty bird." Then she turned away, walking toward the door. Marcus's voice caught in his throat. "Sophie," he said, but she didn't stop. "Where did you get that?" She paused only once at the threshold and looked back at him. Her blue eyes glowed faintly in the morning light. "Maybe," she said, "you gave it to her." The door closed, and Marcus Blackwood, the man who owned the sky, stood in the ruins of his composure, listening to the echo of a dead woman's name in the voice of her daughter. The city never slept around Blackwood Tower. Its mirrored walls reflected the restless glow of 1,000 lights, a monument to the empire Marcus Blackwood had built from ambition and arrogance. But that night, for the first time in years, Marcus didn't look out over his kingdom. He sat in darkness. The office lights were off. Only the flickering neon from the streets below cut faint lines across his face. He hadn't moved since Sophie left hours ago. The broken glass still glittered beneath his desk, tiny stars on the marble floor. He turned the small key fob over in his hand again and again, the metal warm from his grip. Evelyn Hart. Her name felt like a wound reopening. He remembered the last time he'd seen her. The lab had been alive with chaos, the air thick with heat and smoke as engineers scrambled around the Phoenix prototype. Evelyn had stormed into his office, hair disheveled, eyes burning with fury. "You're pushing the test too fast," she had shouted. "You're gambling with lives." And he, so certain of his brilliance, so immune to her warnings, had smirked, poured himself a drink, and said the words that haunted him still. "History doesn't wait for caution, Evelyn. It remembers only the bold." 3 days later she was gone. He had told himself it was fate, that it wasn't his fault, that people like her, idealists, always broke against the machinery of progress. But now, holding her daughter's tiny, dirt-streaked key fob in his palm, he could no longer hide behind the myth of his own greatness. The silence in the office grew unbearable. Marcus stood suddenly, pushing away from the desk. He crossed to the liquor cabinet, poured another drink, then stopped halfway. The glass trembled in his hand. He placed it down untouched. He needed air. The hangar was empty at this hour. Floodlights cast long silver reflections across the smooth floor. The Phoenix sat silent under a massive tarp, its sleek form veiled like a sleeping god. Marcus walked toward it slowly, each step echoing through the hollow space. He stood before it, looking up at the machine that had nearly destroyed him, and maybe somehow had saved him too. Dreams don't make history, he muttered, echoing his own words from earlier. But now the phrase felt hollow, ridiculous. Evelyn had dreamed. Sophie dreamed. He had only conquered. Sir? The voice startled him. Patricia stepped out from the shadows, tablet in hand, fatigue carved into her features. You didn't go home, she said quietly. He gave a small, humorless smile. Didn't feel like sleeping. She hesitated before speaking again. The media found out. Someone leaked the security footage from this morning, the girl, the helicopter, everything. It's everywhere. Marcus didn't respond. She made it work, Marcus, Patricia said after a pause. People are calling her the miracle girl. A long silence stretched between them. Then Patricia added softly, they're also talking about Evelyn again. The sound of her name twisted inside him like a blade. What are they saying? He asked quietly. That you covered up her death. Marcus turned sharply. That's absurd. It was ruled an accident, Patricia met his eyes. By investigators you paid for. The words landed with the weight of truth he could no longer deny. His throat tightened. You think I killed her? Patricia shook her head. I think you killed who you used to be. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. But maybe you still have a chance to fix what's left. When she left, the hangar swallowed the silence again. Marcus turned back to the Phoenix. The tarp rippled faintly in the draft from a vent, almost as if the helicopter exhaled. He closed his eyes. Evelyn, he whispered. If you're anywhere, I'm sorry. Morning crept slowly over the city, soft and gold. Sophie sat on the steps outside the police building, her legs tucked under her chin, a small paper cup of cocoa clutched in her hands. She looked nothing like the girl who had defied a billionaire. Just a child, lonely, quiet, tired. A sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. The door opened. Marcus stepped out, the dark circles under his eyes deep as bruises. He approached her without a word and sat down on the cold stone beside her. For a long time they just sat there in silence, watching the first sunlight crawl across the skyline. Finally Marcus spoke. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. Your mother was the best engineer I ever had. Smarter than all of us. Braver too. Sophie said nothing, only listened. I thought I was building an empire, he continued. But really I was just hiding from her. From the way she made me feel small. Sophie turned her head, studying his profile. She said you were afraid of her, she murmured. He nodded slowly. I was. He swallowed hard. And I was cruel to her because I couldn't be her. They fell silent again. The sound of morning traffic drifted around them. After a while, Sophie spoke. You didn't have to be her, she said softly. You just had to be kind. Marcus's eyes glistened, but he didn't look at her. Your mother believed machines had souls, he said after a long pause. I used to laugh at her for that. Sophie smiled faintly. She was right. You just couldn't hear them. He looked at her then. Really looked at the faint bruises on her wrists, the stubborn light in her eyes, the quiet forgiveness in her small voice, and in that moment, something inside Marcus broke open. The cold armor he had carried his whole life began to crack. I don't know how to fix this, he said, his voice shaking, but I want to try. Sophie didn't answer. She leaned against him instead, small head resting against his arm. For the first time in years, Marcus Blackwood didn't feel like a god or a king or a billionaire. He just felt human. And as the morning light bathed them both, he realized that maybe redemption didn't come with applause or headlines or billion-dollar deals. Maybe it came in silence. In forgiveness. In the steady heartbeat of a child who chose not to hate him. Morning sunlight bled across the glass facade of Blackwood Tower, turning the mirrored surface gold. From the streets below, the building looked invincible, a monument to human ambition. But inside its walls, the empire that Marcus Blackwood had built with arrogance and control was beginning to crack. The boardroom was already full when he arrived. Rows of polished faces turned toward him, men and women who had once feared him, now watching with a strange mix of calculation and satisfaction. The air was sharp with tension, heavy with unspoken judgment. Marcus entered without a word. His reflection moved across the glass table, ghost-like, fractured. Patricia followed quietly behind him, her tablet clutched like a shield. At the head of the table sat Charles Vance, his chief financial officer, the man who had been Marcus's right hand for nearly a decade. Charles rose slowly, his tailored navy suit pristine, his smile colder than the marble beneath their feet. "Marcus," he began smoothly, "we need to talk about damage control." Marcus took his seat, eyes locked on the man. "I'm aware of the situation. Are you?" Vance's smile widened. "The footage from yesterday has gone viral. The board is concerned. Investors are panicking. The press is circling like vultures. And the story about that girl, your miracle orphan, is painting you as a monster." Marcus didn't flinch. "Let them talk." Charles leaned forward, voice tightening. "They're not just talking, Marcus. They're digging. Reporters are reopening the investigation into Dr. Evelyn Hart. They're asking why her safety report disappeared from the archives 2 years ago. They're asking how her daughter ended up hiding in one of your hangars." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus's jaw flexed. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Charles said smoothly, "that you step down immediately. For the good of the company." A murmur rippled through the room. Patricia's knuckles whitened around her tablet. Marcus let out a low, bitter laugh. "You want my crown, Charles? You've been waiting for this." Charles spread his hands, feigning innocence. "I want stability. Our contracts are at risk. The Japanese delegation has withdrawn. Our stock dropped 12% overnight. You've become a liability." For the first time, Marcus didn't respond with fury. He leaned back, studying the faces of the people who once bowed to him. The lieutenants, executives, and sycophants who had called him a genius when it was convenient. Now they couldn't meet his eyes. "So that's it," Marcus said finally. "All it takes is one little girl to remind you who I really am." Charles's smile faltered slightly. "You did this to yourself." Marcus stood, his voice rising, sharp as shattered glass. "No, Charles. We did this. You think I don't remember who signed the test authorizations when Evelyn begged us to wait? Who covered up the prototype failure that killed her? You think I forgot?" The boardroom fell silent. Every head turned. Charles's composure cracked for the briefest second. "You buried it," Marcus continued, stepping closer, voice trembling with restrained rage. "You erased her data. You convinced me it was the only way to save the company, and I believed you." Charles's jaw tightened. "You're losing control, Marcus. I think it's time you—" "No," Marcus snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The sound echoed like thunder. "I've already lost everything worth keeping. I'm not losing the truth, too." He turned and walked out. No one followed. The elevator doors opened to the lower levels, the restricted R&D wing where the Phoenix project had been born. The air here was colder, sterile. Marcus walked past the glass-walled labs, their lights flickering faintly, the hum of dormant machinery surrounding him like whispers from the past. He stopped outside Lab 7, Evelyn's old workspace. The glass door bore faint fingerprints, hers maybe. The memory hit him like a wave. Her laughter, her temper, her brilliance. He unlocked the panel, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light spilling from the narrow window. The old drafting table still stood in the corner, littered with crumpled schematics. Marcus brushed his fingers across the papers. One was labeled Phoenix Biosync Module, Heart Revision. The words blurred before his eyes. He heard the soft click of footsteps behind him. Sophie stood in the doorway, dressed in clean clothes now, Patricia's doing, no doubt. Her hair had been brushed, but her eyes were still that same impossible blue. She looked around the lab with quiet familiarity. "This was Mama's place," she said. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. "She used to say the Phoenix was more than a machine," Sophie continued, walking toward the center of the room. "She said it had to feel the pilot's mind, like two hearts sharing one rhythm." Marcus swallowed hard. She was right. I just couldn't see it then. Sophie stopped beside the old desk, touching one of her mother's blueprints. "She told me once that she didn't hate you," she said softly. He looked up sharply. "She said," Sophie continued, that she pitied you, because you thought power made you strong. But she said one day, you'd learn that only love makes people fly. The words cut through him, leaving him hollow. She said that? Sophie nodded. And she told me if I ever met you, I should forgive you, because forgiveness is the only thing heavy enough to make a man fall to his knees. Marcus turned away, his eyes burning, his voice cracked. She was always too good for me. Behind them, the hum of lights flickered, and then the screens along the lab walls glowed to life. The Phoenix schematics reappeared, lines of code cascading down. Marcus froze. Patricia, he called out, startled. But Sophie wasn't looking at the monitors. She was staring at the bluebird emblem printed on the largest blueprint, her mother's mark. She left something behind, Sophie whispered. The main terminal beeped. A Logan screen blinked alive. Dr. Evelyn Hart, last access 2 years ago. Marcus felt his heart seize. This system was wiped. Sophie reached out and laid her hand gently on the screen. The cursor blinked once, then twice, and the system unlocked. A folder appeared. Phoenix Truth. Marcus stared in disbelief. How did you? She said it would only open when the right heart touched it. Sophie murmured. He exhaled shakily, a strange mixture of awe and grief filling his chest. Evelyn's face appeared in a video thumbnail beside the folder. The timestamp read 2 days before her death. Marcus's knees nearly gave out. Dear God. He clicked the file. Evelyn's voice filled the lab, calm, steady, luminous. If you're hearing this, it means my warnings were ignored. Marcus, if it's you, I forgive you. But the Phoenix must not belong to greed. It belongs to humanity. You can still make it right. The video ended. Silence followed. Marcus turned to Sophie. His face was pale, eyes shimmering. She knew, he whispered. She knew this would happen. Sophie's voice trembled. Then you know what to do now. He looked at her, and for the first time, the empire builder, the tyrant, the untouchable billionaire was gone. In his place stood a man stripped bare, broken, yes, but alive. I'll make it right, he said quietly. Even if it destroys me, Sophie nodded once. That's how you fly. The reckoning rain lashed against the windows of Blackwood Tower like 1,000 accusing hands. The city below was a storm of flashing lights and camera crews. The entire world had shown up for Marcus Blackwood's grand event. Inside, a stage gleamed beneath harsh spotlights. The company logo, Blackwood Aerospace Industries, blazed in silver across a massive screen. Rows of journalists filled the floor, their cameras humming like insects. The announcement was billed as the future of flight. But Marcus wasn't here to sell anything. He was here to burn the empire down. Behind the stage curtain, Patricia's voice trembled. Marcus, are you sure about this? Once you go live, I'm already dead if I don't, he said, straightening his tie. His reflection in the dressing room mirror looked older, worn. The mask of arrogance had melted away, leaving only a man who had seen his own sins reflected back through a child's eyes. He tapped the flash drive in his pocket. Evelyn's final message. Sophie's proof and a lifetime of corporate lies compressed into a single piece of metal. Security buzzed in his earpiece. Sir, Mr. Vance is asking to review your speech. Marcus pulled the earpiece out and dropped it into the sink. Not tonight, Patricia swallowed hard. They'll come for you. I'm counting on it. He smiled then, not the sharp, cruel smile of the tyrant who had once mocked a starving child in a hangar, but something softer, resolute. The smile of a man finally ready to pay his debt. From the rooftop balcony of the tower, Charles Vance watched the rain cut across the glass city. He's really going through with it, he muttered into his phone. You know what to do, a pause. Then a cold voice on the other end. Understood. Vance turned back toward the skyline. Lightning flashed, illuminating the monolith of his ambition. Goodbye, Marcus, he whispered. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Please welcome the visionary founder and CEO of Blackwood Aerospace Industries, Mr. Marcus Blackwood. Applause thundered. Marcus walked out into the light. For a moment he stood motionless, the cameras flashing like gunfire. He scanned the crowd, faces hungry for spectacle, not truth. But near the edge of the stage he spotted her, Sophie, standing between two security guards, small and defiant. Patricia had brought her. He drew strength from that tiny face, the child who had forced him to remember what it meant to be human. Good evening, Marcus began, his voice steady, clear. "Tonight I was supposed to announce the next evolution of the Phoenix Project." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But what I have to say instead will destroy this company." A ripple of confusion ran through the room. Behind the stage, Charles Vance's face went pale. "Cut the feed," he barked into his headset. The technician hesitated. "Sir, we're live to 27 countries. I said cut it." But Marcus had already anticipated this. With one tap on his wristwatch, the feed split into an independent live stream, broadcasting directly to every global network and digital platform. 2 years ago, Marcus continued, Dr. Evelyn Hart, one of the brightest engineers I've ever known, died in what my company called a testing accident. That was a lie. The crowd erupted in gasps. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. "She warned us the prototype was unsafe," Marcus said, voice rising with each word. "She begged us to delay testing. But I silenced her, because profit meant more to me than people." Security guards moved in from both sides of the stage. Patricia ran forward shouting, "He's not finished." Marcus ignored them. His hand tightened around the flash drive. "Dr. Hart left behind a message," he said. "A message I buried. Until her daughter," he looked at Sophie, "found me." The big screen behind him flickered, then changed. Evelyn's face appeared, alive again, radiant in pre-recorded motion. The audience went utterly silent. "If you're hearing this," Evelyn's voice echoed, "it means my warnings were ignored. Marcus, I forgive you. But the Phoenix must belong to humanity, not greed." For a single perfect second, the hall was frozen. You could hear the hum of the cameras, the quiet breath of 1,000 witnesses, the trembling sob that escaped Sophie's lips. Then chaos exploded. Charles Vance stormed down the aisle shouting, "Shut it down! Now!" Security surged onto the stage. Patricia grabbed Sophie and pulled her toward the side exit. "Come on." Marcus held his ground as the guards rushed him. One lunged for the drive. Marcus dodged, the microphone crashing to the floor with a squeal. The projector sparked, the image of Evelyn flickering across the room like a ghost refusing to fade. "Leave him," someone screamed. "He's streaming live." But it was too late. One guard tackled Marcus. The flash drive flew from his hand, skittering across the floor. Marcus slammed his elbow into the man's jaw, rolling free, blood on his face. He snatched up the drive, sprinted for the podium, and jammed it into the broadcast port. The screen brightened again. Evelyn's blueprints, her test reports, the suppressed memos bearing Charles Vance's signature. Every truth they'd buried now shone on the world's screens. Vance's face drained of color. "Kill the power!" Gunfire cracked. A bullet tore through the projector, another ripped through the wall. People screamed. Sophie clung to Patricia as the crowd scattered. Marcus ducked behind the podium, heart hammering. The broadcast timer blinked red. Upload 73%. 82%. 91% Marcus. Patricia shouted from the aisle. "You have to get out." He shook his head. "Not yet." Vance picked up a fallen guard's weapon, aimed it directly at Marcus. "You're finished," he yelled. Marcus met his gaze and smiled. "So are you." The upload bar hit 100%. The feed surged outward, unstoppable. Evelyn's voice filled every television, every screen, every phone across the planet. The Phoenix wasn't built to kill. It was built to lift humanity. "Don't let it fall into darkness again." Vance screamed and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Marcus square in the chest. He staggered back, breath leaving him in a sharp gasp. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. The roar of the storm, the chaos of the room, Sophie's terrified cry. He fell to his knees, one hand clutching the wound, the other still gripping the base of the podium. On the screen above, Evelyn's image flickered, then steadied. Her voice echoed one last time. "Fly, Marcus. Just fly." He smiled faintly. A tear slid down his cheek as he whispered, "I finally understand." Then he fell. Hours later, the storm cleared. The news spread like wildfire. Blackwood Empire collapses. CEO exposes company's crimes in live broadcast. Marcus Blackwood, dead in heroic revelation, across the world. Evelyn Hart's message replayed endlessly. Her words, her brilliance, her forgiveness. Sophie watched it all from a hospital window, wrapped in a blanket too large for her. Patricia sat quietly beside her. Outside, the first sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the tower's ruins in gold. Sophie whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "He did it." Patricia squeezed her shoulder. He did. The little girl pressed her palm to the cold glass, watching the horizon. A jet soared above the skyline, cutting through the morning light. Sleek, graceful, free. For the first time, Sophie smiled. And in that silence, the world remembered Marcus Blackwood not as the man who conquered the skies, but as the man who gave everything to help it fly again. The phoenix rises again. The desert air shimmered with heat. 10 years had passed since the night the world watched Marcus Blackwood die beneath the glare of his own empire's lights. And yet his name was still whispered, in classrooms and boardrooms, in the quiet corners of hangars where engineers still dreamed of touching the sky. At the far edge of Nevada, beyond the old military testing grounds, a new complex stood, Heart Initiative Flight Laboratory. Its glass walls caught the sun like blades. On the main gate, beneath the engraved insignia of a winged phoenix, were two names: Evelyn Hart, Marcus Blackwood. Inside the control room, rows of monitors glowed pale blue against the darkness. Scientists and engineers murmured to one another, voices low, reverent, and at the center, a woman in her 20s leaned over a console, headset around her neck, eyes sharp and alive. Sophie Hart Blackwood. Her reflection in the glass showed the same piercing blue eyes that had once silenced a billionaire, though now they burned with the calm certainty of someone who carried both brilliance and pain in equal measure. Telemetry stable, she said, fingers dancing across the controls. Ignition cycle in 20 seconds. A young technician swallowed hard. Dr. Hart Blackwood, are you sure the prototype's ready? We're testing without a pilot, Sophie smiled faintly. That's the point. Outside, beyond the blast doors, stood a machine unlike anything built before. Sleek, bone-white, its body glinted with gold trim. It bore the same call sign as the one that had started everything, Phoenix II. She watched the turbine lights come alive, soft amber at first, then blinding. The engines hummed, not mechanical, not cold, but almost alive. It was the same hum she'd once heard in a forgotten hangar as a little girl, the sound of something remembering how to breathe. Begin lift sequence, Sophie said. The ground trembled. Dust swirled. The Phoenix II rose slowly from the tarmac, graceful as a heartbeat. Applause rippled through the control room, but Sophie didn't smile. Her eyes were fixed on the readings, on the anomaly flashing across the neural sync monitor. A pattern, a rhythm. 3 short pulses, 1 long. 3 short MB, her breath caught. Pause data feed, she ordered. The tech froze. Ma'am? She leaned closer to the screen. The pattern repeated again. It wasn't random. It was communication. The memory came back in a rush. The last word she'd heard through the speakers on the night Marcus died. Fly, Marcus. Just fly. The Phoenix hovered 50 feet in the air now, steady, silent, flawless. Sophie felt her chest tighten. Open voice channel, she whispered. Static filled the comms. Then a faint voice crackled through, low, distorted, but unmistakable. Sophie. Every sound in the room stopped. The technicians looked at her, terrified. You built it, the voice said. You finished what she started. Her knees went weak. Marcus? She whispered. No answer, only the soft hum of the Phoenix's engines. Then the voice again, this time softer, almost tender. Don't look back, fly, the signal cut. The aircraft shot upward, slicing through the clouds with an impossible burst of light. Everyone in the control room erupted, cheers, shouts, disbelief. But Sophie stood frozen, tears spilling down her face because she knew that voice. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a malfunction. It was him. Later that night, the desert was silent again. The stars burned hard and clear above the hangar. Sophie sat alone on the tarmac, watching the Phoenix II shimmer in the moonlight. Patricia, gray-haired now, still sharp-eyed, walked up beside her and lowered herself into the chair next to her. I saw the feed, she said quietly. Was that? Sophie didn't look away from the jet. Yes, she said simply. Patricia nodded slowly. They say the neural sync was Evelyn's last great design. Maybe she left something of herself inside it. Sophie's lips trembled. Maybe she wasn't the only one. For a long moment they sat in silence, the night wind whispering across the runway. Then Sophie stood and approached the Phoenix. She placed a hand on its cool metallic skin. I forgive you, she whispered. Both of you. The aircraft's internal lights flickered once, soft, golden, like a heartbeat answering her. A small smile curved her lips. "Fly, Papa," she said. The engines stirred faintly in reply, then fell quiet again. Months later, the world watched in awe as the Phoenix II became the first aircraft capable of fully autonomous atmospheric re-entry, rewriting the limits of flight technology. But only one person knew the truth, that inside its neural code, buried deep within the digital heart Evelyn had built, there was a name: Marcus Blackwood. Every time the Phoenix II launched, Sophie could feel him there, in the resonance of its engines, in the hum that carried across the sky. Not a ghost, not a machine, something human, something redeemed. And as the jet disappeared beyond the clouds one final time, she whispered the words that had ended one life and begun another. "Fly, Marcus. The sky remembers you." The Phoenix climbed higher, its trail cutting a line of fire across the dawn, proof that from the ashes of guilt, humanity could still rise.